Good evening, everyone. The doctor is in. Welcome back to my discussion of the BattleTech writing that I've done over the past 11 years. Today, I'm talking about my writing for Era Report 3052. This was a source book that updated all of the militaries, the major personalities. It delivered random assignment tables and technical information for the let's say the end of the original clan invasion, which began in 3049 and ended after the Battle of Tukiad with the clan defeat and the cessation of their invasion. So, this was, I believe, the second product I had worked on after Masters and Minions, the Star Corps dossiers, which I already discussed. Because I had gotten a good feel for how the process worked, instead of requesting just a couple of characters to write, in this case, I requested a lot. And I was rewarded. I wrote multiple sections of this book, the most prominent being the Draconis Combine. Now, this is one of the successor states, one of the 5 major powers of the Inner Sphere. And to me, this was quite a big deal, being able to write a major nation instead of just a couple personalities from a small periphery nation. I think I did a fairly good job. The thing about this Era report is most of the information already existed scattered across other books. There was a book called the 20-Year Update. There were the novels by Michael Stackpole set during the clan invasion that covered a lot of the history, the state of politics. A lot of the major personalities appeared, including the ones that I wrote descriptions of for the Draconis Combine. So, while it was almost more of a data mining and representation rather than creation of brand new material, it was still, in my view, an important step up in demonstrating my ability to write significant portions of a source book for the BattleTech game. While I didn't write any major periphery powers, I did write a sidebar that was split over 2 pages talking about the coreward periphery. So, when the clans invaded, they first had to clear a path through the pirate nations on the coreward periphery of the Inner Sphere. So that was what I detailed in this sidebar, summarizing events that were described in somewhat greater depth in the Wolf Clan source book, the Clan Jade Falcon source book, and some of the novels by Michael Stackpole. I believe it might have been the first of the Return of Kerensky. What was it? Blood Ties, perhaps? Blood Legacy? I can't remember what the title was. I'm going blank trying to think of it right now. I'm sure someone will correct me and I'll feel stupid. And thank you in advance. So that was really all I did for the periphery in this source book. But I did write the mercenary section. And if you'll recall, I wrote the bits about the Franc Reaches and Magistracy of Canopus mercenaries in Masters and Minions. This time I wrote the whole section about mercenaries, talking not just about, specific powers, but I talked about mercenaries as a total, or as a whole. And I focused on, I believe it was 5 major mercenary commands, and one of those I was very happy to pay some special attention to. Most of the ones that I covered were the better-known mercenaries, such as the Kellhounds, Wolf's Dragoons, and the Grey Death Legion, but I was happy that they allowed me to write some details of mercenaries that had not really received a whole lot of attention in the past, and that included the 12th Star Guards. So I was able to, let me see if I can click over here. And in addition to the description I wrote of the military command as a whole, I detailed two of their notable personalities in the subsequent chapter, and you can see those here on the board or on the screen. Well, I'm having a bad video today. This was fairly important to me. This was some of my earliest character creation, and I'm not showing the entire portion of either of these characters. I'm just showing enough to give you an idea of what goes into creating characters. I've created a lot of character descriptions, from technical readouts with notable pilots to describing the commanders in Turning Point's products. I wrote a lot of the pilot cards that first came out in the new BattleTech box sets in 2018. And when I wrote the combat manuals, Combat Manual Mercenaries and Combat Manual Kurita, there are a lot of pilot descriptions in those, and I think I've become fairly adept at presenting a character background with minimal word count. So these are some of my earlier efforts in that regard. Let me know what you think, if I did a good job or not. The part that somewhat disappoints me in this regard is that the fate of the 12th Star Guards had been decided 20 years before I ever became a writer. So those of you who know the lore of BattleTech will know that they didn't fare terribly well in the clan invasion. So while I was able to give descriptions of these characters, they don't have much utility beyond this particular book. And the other section that I wrote, so I also wrote major personalities for all of the mercenary groups and for the Draconis Combine, and I wrote their game special abilities and things like that. But I also had a hand in writing the Museum Technica for the Inner Sphere. Someone else wrote the clan section of this chapter. This discussed all of the recovered technologies and a few new technologies that the Inner Sphere had by this point in time. So during the Succession Wars, as factories were destroyed and engineers and scientists were slaughtered, knowledge was lost, and it took centuries before the Grey Death Legion found the old Star League memory core on the planet Helm, and they distributed that to the successor states, and eventually old technologies were recovered and a few new ones were developed. So I discuss a little bit of that history here on the sidebar regarding military technology classification that you see there on the left. That was where I rationalized some of the discrepancies between different manufacturers of weapons having, for instance, an autocannon 20 with one size cannon bore versus a different manufacturer's autocannon 20 having a smaller bore. And I rationalized it trying to explain these discrepancies and also explain that these are classes, these aren't fixed configurations, that as long as something roughly matches the specifications, it falls into that particular classification, and that goes for armor and structures and weapons and missiles and everything like that. This was my attempt to rectify some of the questions that people on the message board were always bringing up and citing as a lack of consistency in the universe. This was my effort to try to rationalize the solution to that. In this book was also my first time writing the random assignment tables, the RATs. I showed some of these in the turning points that I showed in greater detail, so I won't show the RATs here. What I will show is this table, this upgrade check table. When I put the RATs together, I created this table as a footnote for the random assignments, because it seemed to me that different nations had recovered technology to a greater degree than others, and that should be reflected in whether they are able to have an upgraded version of a mech or a tank or a fighter compared to other nations. And when I turned in the rats, the developer of the product came back to me and he said, wow, this is nice, he liked it. He used it exactly as I created it. I found my original version and nothing had changed, except it was no longer a footnote on the table. It actually went in the description on the page before the tables began. So this was one of my little contributions to BattleTech. If you look, the one thing that I think might be counterintuitive to some people, if you look in the second to last column for the FRR, that's the Free Rasselhague Republic, in 3052, it's harder to get an upgraded mech than in 3051. That's because they didn't have any real territory left in 3052. They had lost so much of their military and they had lost so much of their territory that all of their access to technology was essentially gone. Therefore, because they had fewer units and fewer upgraded units, it was harder to find one. And one of the underlying bases for this table, at least when I created it, is the reason that it gets so much easier to get upgraded technology as time goes on for the three nations that were the two nations that were directly involved, plus the Free Rasselhague Republic, which was already discussed. So the Draconis Combine and the Federated Commonwealth. My rationale was that because they were losing units so fast during the invasion, the ones they would lose more would be the non-upgraded versions, meaning that their population would naturally increase. The Compelling Confederation, the Free Worlds League, and the St. Ives Compact were all fairly free to upgrade at their leisure. Comstar, of course, started out upgraded. That's why they have the original Star League technology. So that's one of my contributions to the game. I'm pretty proud that that table that I came up with as I was generating the rats was deemed good enough to make the final product. And even the rats, I looked at my original version and the printed version, and there were very few changes from my original draft, and I'm proud of that too. That means they let me go ahead and they trusted me. I've created a lot of rats since then, mostly for turning points, and that's mostly everything else. Was fairly typical. Like I said, it was a lot of data mining and extrapolating from other printed sources. For example, the special abilities of mercenary units or the Draconis Combine regiments. So that's really all I have to say about 3052. This came out in 2010, I believe, and I was pretty proud of it. I wish that anybody who's getting into the game now, perhaps because of the Clan Invasion Kickstarter, I wish they'd pick up this book, because this is the one source book that is probably the best for the era when the box set is set for the Clan Invasion. This gives you most of the notable personalities, the major forces involved. So if you've got the new clan mechs coming from Catalyst and everything through the Kickstarter, I'd recommend picking up this book. It's very useful. A lot of good folks contributed to it, and I'm quite proud of my own contributions. So that's all I have to say for today. The Doctor is out.